Thanks, Mr. Chairman. The Alexandria City Council recently extended the local state of emergency until June, I believe, which means that we are able, under our procedures, to meet virtually. So due to the COVID-19 pandemic emergency, the January 18th Board of Directors meeting is being held electronically pursuant to our electronic meeting guidelines and the local state of emergency. If you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you, Jonathan. Lorna, do we have any members of the public here tonight?
No, we do not.
That's a surprise. Okay. Let's begin with the consent agenda. We have the minutes from our meeting in December. I'll give you a moment to look them over, and then I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our December meeting. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes of December?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Be a roll call vote. Since we're in electronic session, Mr. Beal,
Aye.
Ms. Caldarelli,
Aye.
Mr. Dickinson,
Aye.
Mr. Donnelly,
Aye.
Mr. Hill, aye. So approved. There is no unfinished business. The new business, which we've already talked about, is our new board member. We're lucky on really two levels here. The first level that really is worth noting, how many candidates we had for the board vacancy. We had, by my count, I think at least 7, which is the highest participation we've ever had in a board vacancy. I think that speaks to the increased role that AlexRenew is playing. And then the even greater benefit is having Carrie on the board. Mm-hmm. We're entering a new period, as you know, with AlexRenew, much more visible in the goings on of the city, much more impact on our neighborhoods and on the rates because of the big projects underway. And to have somebody of his knowledge of the city and experience with city government, we're lucky to have him. So glad to be here, that you're here, Carrie. Carrie, would you like to say some words?
Sure. For those of you who don't know me, and again, thank you to John and everybody for welcoming me earlier to the board. But I've lived most of my life in Alexandria. I live in the west end of the city in Seminary Valley, and I recently retired from John Marshall Bank after 40 years of a career in commercial banking, with a small hiatus when I was the athletic director at T.C. Williams High School for 3 years. But I recently retired. As John mentioned, I did serve on city council for 18 years, 8 of which as mayor. So I do bring a fair amount of finance experience, with 40 years plus in commercial banking, as well as my time on council, where I spent a lot of time meeting with bond rating agencies, working with finance staff. At that time, the city did not have a AAA bond rating, a triple bond rating, and so we were able to get a AAA rating, and have maintained that because of the financial guidelines that we worked on to guide the city. So hopefully I'll have those talents I can bring to the board, as well as John mentioned, I do still dabble a little bit in city government, although not as much as I used to, nor do I want to, particularly over the last 2 years. which the city, as everybody knows, has had unprecedented challenges, as has the entire world. But at any rate, I look forward to serving on the board, and as I mentioned earlier, I look forward to meeting everybody in person. I think we're all tired of Zoom calls and Zoom meetings, but it is a way of life these days. So at any rate, without any further ado, let's go ahead and proceed with the balance of the meeting.
Thank you, Carrie, and I'll extend an offer to the board members that and I do this with other board members as well. Going out for walks is probably the best way to communicate these days in these days of pandemic. So Carrie, maybe we could create some walking situations where individual board members could join you on a walk and maybe even see some of the construction sites.
Sure.
That's a COVID safe way of interacting, I think. So look forward to that. Okay, let's move on to the agenda. The outcome reports from our CEO. Karen, could you walk us through the various outcome reports?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to take a little longer this time since we have a new member to walk through the reports and also interject some updates that I have to share with you. So the first report is the CEO's report. You can see that for almost 2 years, we did really well, not having any COVID cases, but around Christmas time, we had a lot of folks who had taken vacation and we got hit with 14 cases. Right now, we're at 16 cases, positive cases of COVID that have occurred since that Christmas Eve notification of the first two. We do have a vaccination rate of 97%.
Congratulations.
As of the 1st of January. Thank you. That number won't go up too much more because the rest of those folks have legitimate exemptions, either medical or religious, that have been incurred. And we do have a vaccine requirement policy in place, which has helped us get to that 97%. So overall, we're starting to see the cases taper. We have a lot of young families. We have people who have to use their leave. So you're starting to see that spread because it's so virulent come in here. But we've got all the requirements in place to continue to keep people safe and continue to work around that. So I wanted to give you an update on where we are with COVID. Under operational excellence, this is where we report out our mandatory compliance. This is our mission to treat wastewater. And you can see that we have continued excellent progress around our permit requirements. One thing I wanted to give you an update on, because there was an article and it was a little misleading around wastewater surveillance. We, as you know, we are part of a program around wastewater surveillance. We work with the CDC, we work with the Virginia Department of Health, as opposed to paying a private consultant or a contractor to come in and do that wastewater surveillance. All of our funding so far has come through the CDC through an HHS grant. We've been testing since June of 2021. We only take one sample a week as part of this program that we're working with VDH. To Mr. Dickinson's point, we saw an astronomical increase right around Thanksgiving. It's tapered off a bit, but it's still a little bumpy. It's hard to really call the data because we only take this sample once a week. We are part of a coalition of 25 wastewater plants across the Commonwealth that VDH has picked to be part of this preliminary study that they're doing with this CDC grant that they were able to get. Ultimately, VDH hopes to develop a dashboard to take all this data that they're getting from the wastewater utilities and have it available for everybody in the Commonwealth. I did want to point out, though, that just for clarity's sake, the analysis counts the genetic material or the copies of the RNA that come out of your body, as opposed to the live virus. It's not a live virus. Actually, the COVID virus easily breaks apart in water. And then we just count that load. So you're not counting cases, you're just counting the DNA load, right? To give you an indication. So it's just a tool another tool to try to help communities get ahead of potential increases. The hospitals use it a lot so that they can get ready for surge, right? If they start to see those trends increasing, they know they got to bring people in and have the hospital beds and supplies ready. And it's just a tool to help an individual, if we get that information out, to better manage their own personal risk and health as we go forward. So that.
Karen, real quickly, are the trends you're seeing consistent with the trends that the other jurisdictions are seeing?
Yes, they are all very similar, where it was kind of steady for a really long time, and then you just saw that Omicron hit, and that Thanksgiving weekend is where it literally went almost a straight line up in the air. You can see that on, CNN's data or the Times data. All of it shows that same thing. Everybody was just tired, and they got together with their families and kids, and it just easily spread. So we are seeing a slight drop off, not a significant downward trend, just a little bit where it's easing. But again, we just got that data, and we'll have to see a couple more weeks, because we only get the data once a week, to see if that stabilizes at all.
A question, Karen. In that regard, what is the expense of doing an analysis of a sample? Do we know?
So I don't know what it costs us. I do know we don't pay for it, right? It's through the grant with CDC, and VDH is paying for it, and VDH is using their labs. I do know personally they are, from a personnel perspective, very resource limited. I do know that if you hire one of the firms that's out there, it's $350 a sample.
Okay.
To do that analysis. It's not insignificant, and that does not count the labor of us going out and pulling those samples and getting them packaged up and shipping them to the company. And all of this data does get shared with the Alexandria Health Department, and we have put them into the group that VDH has, the community of practice. But again, the Alexandria Health Department also has its resource limitations. Wastewater surveillance is just a nice to have when they're really dealing with getting shots out and getting testing and those kinds of things. So you have to balance all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's no other questions there, again, we go through where we are with public engagement, customer service. I'll speak to that a little bit more about delinquencies in the financial report. And then next we'll go to the AlexRenew dashboard. So if you turn the page, you'll find the AlexRenew dashboard. I'll briefly walk through that at the end of my talk. I've asked Mr. Carl to jump in. We got some, all right, I'm gonna nerd out from an engineering perspective. We got some very cool pictures back from Herring Connect, which is the manufacturer of the tunnel boring machine. So I asked him to show you that. So as soon as I walk through the dashboard, I'll ask him to pull that up. Yeah, it is, the shop is amazing and the equipment is amazing, but you'll get to see it in a second. So we put this dashboard together. It's updated every month. We give a similar dashboard to the two council members who serve as the two council representatives on our council board work group. They get a quarterly update that's very similar to this, and we're actually meeting with them tomorrow at 5 o'clock. So the first page, we give the overview, we give the current schedule, and you can see how we've broken it up. There's work at AlexRenew. There's work at what we call Holland Lane. Basically, that's our construction staging area. It's where we've used the the Zell property for lay down. So that'll get really active here really quickly. Pendleton Street is the former 001 outfall name. Rail Street is 002 down by St. Mary's. And then the Hoofs Run Interceptor, that's outfalls 3 and 4, right up at Duke Street, and that runs the interceptor down the length to AlexRenew. We've also started, you can see at the bottom, monitoring any major project delays. We have 2 that we're monitoring right now. We are starting to see some supply chain issues from the construction side. Specifically, we had a COVID outbreak. Herring Connect, who makes the tunnel boring machine, also has to make the cast, where we make those 6 tunnel segments in a key, right? They come in, they get lifted, and they make the ring, and that's how you build the tunnel. The factory that was going to make that mold had a COVID outbreak. So Herring Connect was very quick, and they found another manufacturing, but we're estimating, about a potential 6-week delay in getting that factory up and running and ready to build that. If you flip over to the second page, we have a summary.
Before you move from there, I was amazed that the mold, where it was being made in Slovenia and now in Turkey, which is quite remarkable. But the actual manufacturing will occur here in the States. These are just the molds, not the segments.
Correct. You need the mold as like a little rubber mold. And then I think the plant is right up here in Maryland, very close to us. Justin can correct me when he speaks later on.
Yeah, they were the ones that were manufacturing it for DC Water.
I'll let him speak to that
Okay.
when he's there, just to make sure. On the second page, we give a schedule, we give the overall progress right there in the corner. You can see that we are up to date. We did have a recovery schedule in place, and that's why we've been able to kind of mirror those 2 schedules. Then you can see we break down the schedule by each of the different construction areas. So Pendleton Street, we've got that sheeting going into place. If you recall, we talked about the need to do that. We have a time of year restriction. So we've got to get that in before February 15th, I believe is the date, because of the sturgeon. And you can see both the blue is the design progress and the green is construction. Remembering again that this is a design build contract. So we're designing as we're building to try to get ahead of the schedule. Royal Street, this some more site mob is going on right there. Hoofs Run, you can see them working there. They're actually moving. We have a very short time frame that we can be in that area because of our agreements with the hotel. We're using a lot of their property there to make that happen. The waterfront tunnel, there you get a little snippet of what's going to come with the tunnel boring machine. And then, of course, AlexRenew, which we have been under construction since May. It's really amazing to watch them put those slurry walls in. Some huge construction, huge equipment. You can see it if you do go up on the field there. I'm pointing behind me to take a look. And we've got some graphics there to try to help explain to the kids what's going on. This is really cool. The kids have never seen this big equipment. So there's a nice size display, and can you find the pieces of equipment, and we have them named. It's just a good way to get some of the youngsters engaged and learn. You're not going to ever see this again in the city, so why not take advantage of it and share that information. On the following page, we try to give you a 6-month look ahead. So you can put, if you're interested, you can put these dates in your calendar. If there's people who are interested, you can share these dates with them. And again, we have the broad one under community outreach. You can see again, Council Board Work Group meeting tomorrow. We have a AlexRenew Stakeholder Advisory Group meeting on Thursday, and a listening session for the community, which will be virtual this time. Hopefully in July when we have the next one, it'll be in person to catch people up. And that one is next Wednesday. So you may want to put those on your calendar. And then again, we break out the major work by area to let you know what's going on. That way, if you're out with your neighbors and they're like, hey, what is going on? You're aware of it. And again, this gets shared with the Council Board Work Group, who consists now of the mayor and the vice mayor, and they can share that with their colleagues as well, because they're usually the first touch point when somebody in the community has a question about what's going on. Page 4.
Before we move off of page 3, first of all, Karen, this is still one of the best presentations of project progress I've ever seen. I think page 2 is so informative. Now, about the outreach events, what are your expectations for attendance at the community listening session on the 26th? I think that'll be.
I honestly don't know. I haven't been tracking invites. It's January. I don't, there's a lot going on. We didn't have very many at the last virtual one. I'm not sure that we'll get a lot, but it is something that we've made a commitment to do. I'm going to expect when we do the ones in July, because they're going to be face-to-face at each of the locations, we'll have a lot more engagement. People need to see it. It's hard to talk about construction on a screen, right? It just doesn't jazz you as much.
I make a point to walk by the sites in my evening walks. You see progress every day. It's really amazing. Now I notice you're doing I think SIP and C. Is that what they're called? How's that going over?
So I was going to talk to that on the last page.
Okay, I'll wait till then.
All right. The next page, it doesn't change. It's like the standard to give you context. Here's the job. Here's what the 4 things are going to look like. The 5th page talks about cost, and we update this monthly as we get the pay apps. We also try to do the spend by locality, realizing that we're a region here in the Washington metro region, and you can see the spend by area to try to show that we are reinvesting the dollars that the community is spending in our locality, but also that the Commonwealth, who has partnered with us and given us grant money, is getting a return on that investment back into the Commonwealth of Virginia. Some summaries that Mr. Johnson had asked for on the contracts, and then you can see the cash flow, and that we're pretty consistently meeting what we had estimated as the engineer's estimate. The total spend and the splits between Alexandria and Fairfax on that spend. And then the last page, we do a full summary of the community outreach in the different areas there. We do have our educational elements with Chloe. Everybody loves Chloe. She has her own book series, and the SIP and C stations, you can see we're talking about there. What we've done with SIP and C, anytime that there's a major event that's could impact negatively the community, we station a little tent with one of our engineers or our resident engineers out there, construction managers, just for 2 hours. One is on Tuesday and one is on Wednesday. One is at Pendleton right now, one is at Duke Street. So we started this because we knew we were going to put those sheets in, and you have to vibrate them in. So it's not a noise you would normally hear in Old Town. And it could have, some feeling that people aren't used to, right? They may be able to feel that vibration as well. So we thought, in a way to try to manage the message and also make sure people had a touch point. They didn't have to call the mayor. They could just go out there. We would have people stationed there. I don't know the statistics off the top of my head about how many people, but people, it's Alexandria. People are friendly, right? They're walking their dog, they see a person, it's got coffee, there's doggy treats, right? They're there. And we get a lot of good questions like, what are you doing? And then we can explain it. And they're like, yeah, we saw this big equipment. This is great. So we're getting a lot of good feedback that way. The other piece too is when they're out there, they'll go tell their friends in the condo building, and then the next thing you know, you got more people coming out walking their dogs, or little groups of bike riders stopping by. So it has been a good way to let people know this is happening. Like the Duke Street one, we knew we were going to start to have intermittent lane closures on Duke Street. Had the gentleman out there to try to capture as many people as possible. We know as AlexRenew, we just can't touch everybody. So we try to innovate and attempt a lot of different things to try to capture different different groups. So overall, I think it's been interesting. They're not going to be every week. They're going to be intermittent as things change. And as we have things that could be impactful, whether it's trucks or bike changes to the routes here, we're gonna have a lot of that with Duke Street to get the word out. You can also see the highlights of the community meetings. Again, if you have an HOA or somebody who wants to have us come talk to them, let me know. And I will get that information to the right people on staff to get that set up. So just give us that contact information. And then you can see some of the other community events that we have, digital programming. And then at the very last page, we always try to spotlight what's going on there. Mr. Hill is correct. There is a lot going on. These guys are busting butt to get this job done. It is a very tight timeline with a lot of moving parts. It's a job with no float. And so we try to highlight one of the cool things that they're doing in this one. It gives you an explanation of the sheeting installation. And that is generally what you'll see every month in the dashboard. So there's a lot of information. Take a look before the board meeting. If there's something that you don't understand, please feel free to drop me an email. I'll give you a call ahead of time, and then we can have a conversation, and then we can bring it up here as well. Because if you don't understand it, I'm sure there's somebody else that doesn't, and we can put it out here and more transparently for everybody.
Mr. Beal has his hand up.
Yes, Madam CEO, I wanted to get back to your COVID cases. You said we have 16. What's our total staff number? I'm just curious. That's 16 out of how many people?
16 out of about 116 or so. You're catching me a little
Okay.
off guard because I don't know the exact number. You know, people are coming and going. It might be 114, something
That's-
like that.
I don't need exact. I was just curious. Are
That's a good percentage.
you managing the absences pretty well?
We are. It was a little tough there between Christmas and New Year's. That's notoriously when we're short-staffed. And so we've already had some contract operators on our overnight shift because we've just been low on contract operators. In between that and overtime, we've been able to manage it. There was a short moment where because I still hold my class 1 license, I did offer to come in and help them on shift work. The chief operator was pretty insistent that no, he can't do it. I was really actually disappointed. I thought it would be so cool not to have, to do something real for a change and not have to do the administrative.
You know, you're the boss. You ought to be able to do what you want to do. But
I have to honor my employees' wishes as well, right? And he did an admirable job. He really, he's new in the role. He's young, and he's just doing a phenomenal job. So I wanted to respect his wishes.
A question on that point. Are any of our employees hospitalized, or do we know?
No, and that's a very good question. We have been incredibly fortunate that those who have been sick, and some of them have been, boosted as well, have not, while they may have been ill, like out for a week or 10 days, no one's had to go into the hospital or be intubated with, or, we've had
Thank God.
gratefully no one pass away. So I'm pleased by that. Always scary. Anything else? Right, Mr. Carl, would you mind?
Before we.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, Karen, before we move on to that, you did mention that we can share this dashboard. It's a wonderful piece of work. It really is. It tells the whole story very, very well. Can we share it with our homeowner associations?
Absolutely. Once it's out in this meeting, it's a public document. And so it's available. It gets sent to you in your board package electronically. If we need to, I can ask Lorna to have it as a separate attachment when it gets sent to you. So it's easier for you to distill, if that would be something that.
No, I can just grab it from from the Board of Effects, but no, I think my homeowners, the Rosemont Civic Association, would probably share it broadly, and then you'd get a whole lot of questions from Rosemont, but at least you know where they came from.
It can't hurt. I mean, this is a huge investment everybody's making. So the more that people know it and understand it and see what we're doing is helpful. And you never know, somebody can always have one of those crazy ideas that actually adds value to the job. So,
Thank you. Thank you. That was the only question I had. Thanks.
okay. Okay, you guys ready for some cool tunnel picture or tunnel boring machine pictures? Okay, go ahead, Justin. Thanks.
Thank you. Can everybody see the screen? Just want to make sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yeah.
just a quick recap. Our machine, our tunnel boring machine for AlexRenew is under construction right now in Schwanau, Germany. Just to recap, this is a cross section looking at the size of our machine. So on the very left-hand side of the page, you can see 14.7 feet. That's our machine diameter. We've got our cutter head. You're going to see pictures of the cutter head and the shield, which is the steel part that makes up the machine. And you'll also now start seeing pictures of our trailing gear, which are the 420 some odd feet of gear behind the machine that's used to support the mining operations. So we'll take a look at the cutter head, the airlock, the shield, and the trailing gear this evening. So these are the pictures of the shield on the left. You can see the shield here painted in white. You can see it's in, currently you can see two pieces of it here in the front, here in the rear behind it. What you're looking at here, this is the area where the cutter head would be attached. And that would be the part that is grinding against the ground and taking the soil out of the ground and pressurizing the ground. The area here behind here, this is the main bearing. And if you walked around to the back of this piece of the shield, you would see the main drive. This is essentially the engine that drives the cutter head to turn. And I think this is the first picture off to the right. We're actually seeing the front side of the cutter head. So you can see the front side of the cutter head here. This is the machine, part of the machine that faces out towards the ground. You can see the grizzly bars and the area between the cutter head where the soil will pass through. And this is just a more detailed view of the cutter head and really gives you a sense of how much welding and steel work that goes into these machines. Again, the cutter head 14.7 feet in diameter. The second slide that we're sharing is the airlock. The airlock is needed for interventions to go in and maintain the tools on the cutter head. This is where folks that are doing that work would come in, they would get compressed and decompressed to work under about 3 bars of pressure, just like diving. You can see here, these are the two chambers. And first time we're getting a look inside, they've got stickers on the doors. And first time we're getting a look inside the chambers to be able to complete the intervention. On the left, we've got our compression or decompression chamber. And then on the right is our decompression chamber. Workers would come in through here, go out this little door, and they'd be standing behind the cutter head about 120 feet down below the ground to do any maintenance necessary. And then the last bit, certainly not least, is the support system for the tunnel boring machine is the trailing gear. A couple things to note. This is the first gantry. So this is the piece of trailing gear that's immediately behind the shield. So this is the first piece of trailing gear. You can see some of the equipment on here to support the mining operations. Walking back, we've got gantry 4. It's just kind of cool. You can see the ID of the tunnel and how they shape the steel. These are likely for foam injection to lubricate the ground as we mine. And then the last piece, gantry 8, we selected this photo because we're a little different here in Alexandria. We are not putting any rail down on the ground. If you all remember, when we did take a visit to DC Water, they had a rail in the center of the tunnel. Our trailing gear, as well as our locomotives, will be rubber tired vehicles. And you can see that the trailing gear here will ride on the edge of the curve of the tunnel.
Okay.
And that's the update. These pictures were taken on January 18th. So I'm sorry, January 17th, so we're about a day later. To answer the question asked earlier, Ms. Blanche, the segments will be constructed at Bay State which is in Brandywine, Maryland, just across the Woodrow Wilson Bridge.
Thank you. And thank you to the board for indulging me and sharing these pictures, but we just got them and I thought it would be a lot of fun, especially now that we have Mr. Donnelly on the board, to get him up to speed on TVMs and all the cool stuff that we do.
It is cool.
It really is.
A lot of money. Yeah.
Justin, I had a question. When we visited DC Water, there was a control booth there right behind the cutter head, I believe. Is there going to be one in our system?
Yes, the control cabin is at the back of that first gantry I just showed you.
Okay.
Same idea. Just everything's just a little bit smaller because we're a 14 and a half or foot machine, and that was a 26-foot machine.
Right.
A little bit bigger actually, but
Justin, before you go, when does the device ship? When will it be at sea on its way to Alexandria?
so the factory test is in early April, and then hopefully by end of April, early May, she's on her way across the Atlantic.
Great, thank you. Any other questions for Justin or Karen on this topic? Karen, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next, we have the financial report. So you'll see the monthly financials. Unfortunately, my CFO is under the weather and can't be here. Otherwise, I'd turn it over to her. So I'm going to give a very high-level overview of this. If you have any questions, though, please let me know. I'll do my best to answer them. And if not, I'll get back to you. This is a relatively straightforward report. You can see we report on revenues, speaking both to the blue, which is Alexandria ratepayers, as well as the Fairfax contributions. Flipping over to page 2, you have two different versions of how to look at the revenue and capital contributions. We look at that year over year based on where the different funds are based on our trust agreements. In expenses on page 3, we break that out to show you actual versus budget. And then what our spend rate is both annually and over a 3-year period. You can see right now we're tracking pretty good. We are seeing some significant cost increases. You can see that below in those comparisons. The chemical costs are just going up significantly. Just trying to get them here, the trucking costs, as well as just their costs overall, and just some of the basic needs for equipment and tools, some of the basics, all of those are being hit by some inflationary factors. So it's too early to tell where we are with this right now. Talking to Ms. McIntyre, we are still trending positively for the budget, that we're going to stay within the budget guidelines. We'll let you know if anything major goes off the rails as we move along. On page 4, you can again see the different cost codes that we have: our operating budget, debt service, the general fund, which is Alexandria only funds, the joint improvement renewal and replacement funds that are required under our agreements, the same thing that we have for Alexandria. And then the project fund really speaks to our capital improvement program, where that is going as well. And you can see both this year in blue and then a 3-year average. On delinquencies, I wanted to give a little bit more detail on this. You can see we track it monthly. It does kind of go up and down a little bit. We are not doing any disconnects, but Virginia American Water has started doing disconnects for non-payment of water bills. And so there's some peripheral benefit to us. You can see that in a little bit in the drop. But overall, we have some of the stats in there about those that are delinquent by more than 60 days. We usually look at 60 days as an indicator. And that's about 1,150 customers, give or take. The total amount is about $540,000. This trend has been stable for over 3 months. We did receive some CARES grant funding. This funding was very specifically targeted just to help all wastewater accounts across the Commonwealth, tried to lift up those that were delinquent more than 60 days. If we had not received that CARES funding, we estimate we would currently have about 2,000 customers who are in arrearages more than 60 days, and that cost would be over $1 million. And I just want to remind you, with the CARES money, it's a little complicated, but we did receive that funding last year. Again, our tranche was part of monies that Virginia gave out to everybody around the Commonwealth who had wastewater accounts and those that were in arrearages, all public entities, I should say. The amount we received was $439,736.80. And that's because they only had so much money, and then they had to apportion it based on your need. With that money, we gave 9 rounds of payouts. We did expend all of that grant money. We gave out 857 payouts. 662 of those were to one-time people who were in arrearages more, over 60 days. 199 had multiple payouts. And as the program progressed, we were able to allow some of those things. When it rolled out really quick, and both the state and the localities are working together to create that framework. One of the things that we did was we used a company called Promise Pay. They use your phone, and they really helped us get that reach so that we could disperse all $440,000. Before we had them on board, we had only expended about $100,000, and we really wanted to make sure that we got the message out. So they were super helpful. That is the only tranche of money that we've used Promise Pay for at this point. There's another tranche of money that has come about through ARPA. And that money is about $229,000. The issue here is this has a really short window for us on their arrearages. It starts at like the end of August and goes through the end of the year. Because when we had applied for this money, it was back before August. And so we still had a lot of arrearages. Some of those arrearages that were accounted for in the application for this ARPA money have now been paid. Either they were paid with the CARES money, or the customers themselves got themselves out of their arrearage. So we don't think we'll be able to spend all of we know we're not going to be able to spend all 229 and expend that to people with delinquencies based on the requirements for that delinquency, more than 60 days in a certain time frame. We do track these numbers. I talked to our CFO, Ms. McIntyre. She's very comfortable with the trends right now. We're not seeing anything that would alarm us when it comes to delinquencies or anything that we need to worry about at this point. Should that change, we will definitely let you know, both in the report, and I'll call it out in my board report as well. And then following on page 5, we talk about our investments. We use PFM as our investment advisor and also as our financial advisor, as you know, when we've gone to both WIFIA and through VRA to get the VRLF revolving loan funds. We talk then about our financial policies, our cash reserves. You can see where we are against the cash reserve policy, our debt service coverage, some of the basic metrics for well-financed utilities, and that follows on page 7 as to where we are right now. Again, that number changes as we pull funds in, get grant monies and those kinds of things. And overall, that gives you an overview of the financial report. If there's any questions on that.
Just one question on the expense category on page 3. It mentions that personnel expenses are down. Is that pandemic related or just an aberration? It's pandemic related. We had a lot of employees depart once COVID kind of opened up this summer, right? We had
trained them well. A lot of people retired in other areas and they saw an opportunity not to live in the city or have a different lifestyle. And so many of them moved off into very good jobs, but in other areas. So they were able to react and respond. So we're still rebuilding and retooling the staff at this point.
Thank you. Thank you. Any questions for our CFO on the financial report? Okay, thank you.
And if there, I have two more things to bring to your attention. Back in info, we're showing you the annual report that we put together. It's a little late. That is on me because there's just a lot going on in November and December. I'm trying to keep the staff healthy. So take a look at that. We are publishing that now, but it is a much simplified report from what we normally put out just because of the situation that we're in with COVID. But it gives an overview of the year. So that's there. If you see any typos or anything, please let me know because we're going to send that to the printer here shortly to get that done. It'll also be like, mostly we're going to use the electronic format and have it available on the website. So take a look for that in the next couple of weeks. Also, one of the things I would really encourage you to do is we've put the board calendar in and we've tried to put on the right-hand side of this calendar dates and times, estimates like weeks when there should be certain committee meetings. You have Finance and Audit Committee meeting. We know they're generally going to be in this time frame. The same with governance, as there's the general manager transition here, especially toward the end of the year. So I would encourage you to take a look. If you have any questions, if I've missed anything, please let Ms. Huff or me know, and we'll make sure it gets on the calendar. And we'll keep this updated and put it in board effects for you. So those were the two things I wanted to draw your attention to real quick before we left.
Just an observation. I think the annual report, although it is brief, it is very approachable, very readable. I think the facts that are presented are actually the relevant facts, and those are the ones you walk away with. So it's well laid out. And just to go to repeat for the board, this is a busy week ahead. There's the council board work group tomorrow, the SAG the next day, and then the listening session and the governance meeting the following week. So we're starting off 22 with a pretty active January. So I hope as many of you can sit in those meetings as you can. They're always very informative, especially to hear council's reaction and also the SAG reaction as well. So hope you can attend.
In one final fact that I just got some numbers on, you asked how many people might attend the community listening session. We do have 25 people signed up so far. So if they all show up, that's a pretty good grouping. So hopefully it's not 5 of you, but if it is, then we have 20 people signed up for.
Well, I know at least one, actually.
But I would encourage you to sign up and take a listen. The team does a great job explaining where we are and fielding the questions.
Are there any questions from the board or others?
Mr. Chairman and Madam CEO, we have a new city manager who has just arrived, and I'm sure he has a lot to do in front of him, but I hope as soon as possible, you can bring him over and introduce him to Renew. Just get that on his agenda. And I'm sure he will look forward to it because he's an important component of this team.
Yes, yes, thank you for that. We'll definitely, I will definitely work with the Deputy City Manager Baker to talk about that and see where we're going. So she knows that's on his list. I think the first thing he has to do is the budget. And so I'll be aware of that. And yes, I'm sure he will definitely make his way over.
Any other questions for our CEO? Any other business to discuss? If not, perhaps a motion to adjourn, very
So
brief.
moved, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of the day, rest of the month, and we'll see many of you tomorrow and the next day. Thanks. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Thank you.
Aye.
Good to see everybody.
Bye.